Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that unpacks key sources to help you get clarity and hopefully some real insight.
That's the goal.
And today, we're looking at something pretty foundational in Reformed thinking. It's John Calvin's ideas on how we, as believers, should think about this life and the life to come. We're drawing from his meditation on the future life.
Yeah, it's a really rich piece. We'll be thinking about how our experiences here, especially, the tough stuff, the trials,
Right.
how they shape our view and actually get us ready for eternity. We want to pull out some really significant ideas for you from Calvin's writing here.
Not just what he thought, but maybe why it still speaks to us now.
Exactly, why it matters.
Okay, so let's start with God's involvement. I think for many people, the idea that God is active even in hardship can be, well, confusing.
It definitely can be.
So what do these writings tell us about how God shows his fatherly care? Maybe even in ways that seem contradictory at first glance.
Right, okay. So the sources we're looking at show God really actively using all of our life experiences.
All, like the good and the bad.
Both, yes. The miseries and the blessings. And the purpose behind it all is consistent: to draw believers toward himself
Right.
and to prepare them, to ready them for eternal glory. It's like a divine strategy, you could say.
A strategy involving both comfort and difficulty.
Precisely. Before God fully unveils the, quote, inheritance of eternal glory, he gives us what Calvin calls lesser proofs of his fatherly care.
Lesser proofs. What does that look like day to day?
Think about the daily benefits he provides, just life itself, Even with all the struggles, Calvin sees life as a fundamental blessing of God.
Even with the hard parts.
Even with the hard parts. It's a testimony of divine benevolence. Our existence, all its ups and downs, is actually meant to steer us toward salvation. Even things like nature, the sunrise, the food we eat, the air we breathe, these things are meant to stir up gratitude in us.
Gratitude for just being alive and provided for.
Yes. And these benefits, they might seem small sometimes, but they let us, quote, taste the sweetness of the divine generosity right now, here on earth.
Like a little sample?
Exactly. It's an initial taste. And Calvin says this taste whets our hope and desire to seek after the full revelation of this in the future.
So even the ordinary stuff is part of pointing us forward toward God.
That's the idea. It's all part of directing our hearts toward him.
Okay, so these daily blessings, they're like a foretaste, a little preview of something much bigger. An appetizer, maybe?
That's a great way to put it. An appetizer for the feast to come.
But then, and this is where it gets maybe a bit more jarring for us today, Calvin turns to the difficult parts of life.
The trials.
Yeah. If God is really caring for us like a father, how do hardships, tribulations, how do they fit into that picture? It feels almost backwards, right? Finding fatherly care in struggle.
It does feel backwards from our usual perspective, yeah. But the sources are really clear here. Calvin argues God uses the fittest means to draw us back.
Fittest means, like the most suitable tools.
Right. The most effective ways to shake off our sluggishness, lest we cleave too tenaciously to what he calls this brutish love of this world.
Okay, brutish love of this world.
Right.
That sounds pretty intense. What does he mean by that?
It's a really key phrase. He sees it as this sort of unthinking, almost animal-like attachment we have to immediate comforts, to earthly things.
Like just wanting what feels good right now.
Exactly. It's brutish because it lacks that higher spiritual focus that believers are supposed to have. It keeps us sort of stuck to the ground.
Prevents us from looking up towards heavenly things.
Right. It keeps our minds from ascending. So this isn't just random suffering we experience. It's what Calvin calls active instruction.
Instruction, how so?
Instruction in the vanity of the present life by continual proof of its miseries. It's like parental discipline, really.
Designed to shift our focus, keep us from getting too settled here.
Yes, precisely. To reorient our deepest affections and remind us this world isn't our permanent home.
That's a powerful thought, this brutish love holding us back. So how does this paternal discipline, this shaking off of sluggishness, actually show up in our lives? What kind of trials are we talking about?
Well, Calvin gives several examples. For one, he says, God allows believers to be troubled and plagued either with wars or tumults or robberies or other injuries.
Wow, that's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Wars, robberies.
Yeah. And think about what those things do. They completely shatter any illusion we might have of finding deep and secure peace in this life.
Because you can't feel secure when there's chaos or danger around.
Right. We naturally crave stability, peace, predictability, but God sometimes introduces disruption.
To remind us that true peace isn't found here.
Exactly. A sudden job loss, maybe, or conflict in your community, even a personal setback. These things can serve as stark reminders that our real security isn't earthly.
So they're not just random bad luck.
Calvin argues they're not arbitrary punishments. They're deliberate interventions to keep us from sinking too deep into worldly contentment, because he knows we forget how temporary this all is.
Okay, that makes a certain kind of sense. It's like saying, don't get too comfy, this isn't the final destination. But what about things that feel more personal, like money, that feels so basic to our security here? How does that fit in?
That's a great question, and he addresses it head on. He says, to counter our too great eagerness after fleeting and transient riches.
Which most of us probably have to some degree.
Yeah, he says God sometimes reduces people to poverty or maybe just keeps them in a moderate station, limits their wealth.
How might that happen?
Calvin lists things like exile, sometimes by barrenness of the earth, sometimes by fire, sometimes by other means. It could be anything that shakes up our financial stability.
And the point is?
To loosen our grip on what's inherently unstable and temporary anyway. To keep our ambitions from being totally consumed by getting more stuff.
It's like stripping away the external stuff to show what really lasts.
Yes, exactly. Forcing us to rethink where our actual security comes from. If your identity is all wrapped up in your wealth or status, losing it is jarring.
Devastating even.
It can be, but Calvin would say it can also be a corrective experience, redirecting your focus from earthly treasure to heavenly treasure.
Okay. What about our relationships, family, marriage? Those are often where we find our greatest joy and sense of belonging. Does this discipline touch those two? That feels really sensitive.
It is sensitive, absolutely. And the sources say that to prevent us from finding too much delight in, say, the goods of marriage.
Too much delight. Can there be too much delight in marriage?
Well, perhaps delight that becomes idolatrous, finding our ultimate meaning there. Calvin suggests God might allow believers to be troubled by the depravity of their wives, or humbles them by evil offspring, or even afflicts them with bereavement.
Loss of a loved one. That's incredibly painful.
Without a doubt, these are deeply painful things. But they're presented as ways God prevents us from investing our ultimate hope and satisfaction in human relationships.
Because they're imperfect and temporary.
Exactly. Like all earthly things, they're subject to brokenness and loss. Calvin isn't saying God causes sin, like a spouse's depravity or a child's rebellion.
But he allows it. Allows the consequences of living in a fallen world to be felt.
Yes, he allows the reality of this fallen world to touch even our closest bonds. When relationships struggle or when we lose someone dear, it's a hard lesson that our hearts can't find perfect, unchanging rest in anything created.
It pushes us towards the only perfect relationship, with God himself.
That's the idea, where there's no imperfection, no loss.
Okay, and what about things like health or pride? We can easily feel self-reliant when we're healthy and things are going well.
Right, and Calvin says to stop believers from getting puffed up with vainglory or exult in self-assurance, God sometimes sets diseases and perils right in front of them.
Illnesses, accidents.
Yes, things that show us how unstable and fleeting are all the goods that are subject to mortality. Think about a sudden serious diagnosis or a near-miss accident.
It certainly reminds you of your fragility.
Instantly. These physical reminders aren't meant to crush us, but to ensure we're sufficiently awakened to weigh the misery of this life. They highlight our limits, our finite nature.
So all these different kinds of trials, external conflicts, financial stress, relationship troubles, health issues, they all serve this purpose.
According to Calvin, yes. They ensure we aren't captivated by the world's attractions. This whole process, sometimes called the discipline of the cross, it helps us learn that this life really is troubled, turbulent, unhappy in countless ways, and that even its good things are uncertain, fleeting, vain, and vitiated by many intermingled evils.
Meaning even the best stuff here has some flaw or shadow attached.
Yes. Nothing is purely good or perfectly secure in this life. It's all mixed.
So if I'm hearing you right, the idea is to see these struggles not as random bad luck or God being angry.
No, not primarily punitive.
But as intentional, maybe even loving, acts from God meant to redirect our deepest desires, adjust our focus.
That's it. It's a redirecting, a compassionate, though sometimes painful, pointing towards what truly lasts.
Okay. So this leads to Calvin's view of life itself. You mentioned it's described as troubled, turbulent, unhappy.
In countless ways, and in no respect, clearly happy. Yeah, that's the quote.
That sounds incredibly pessimistic to modern ears.
It does, doesn't it? But it's intended as a sober theological assessment, not just a complaint.
A realistic view.
He would argue so, that all the things we usually think of as goods, riches, honors, marriage, health, they're all uncertain, fleeting, vain, and vitiated by many intermingled evils.
So even the best parts are flawed, temporary, mixed with bad.
That's the claim, which leads to a pretty startling conclusion. Believers should seek and hope for nothing but struggle in this life.
Whoa, hope for struggle. That sounds awful.
It sounds like a call to misery, I know. But it's not about wanting pain for its own sake. It's about managing expectations.
Also,
If you expect struggle, if you know it's part of the landscape of this life, then when it comes, you're not totally thrown off balance. You're not crushed.
you're prepared to face it with faith, rather than asking, why me, all the time.
Something like that. It shapes your response.
Okay, so this view, that life is inherently difficult and unhappy. It might seem grim, but maybe it helps explain why we still cling to it so tightly, even though we see its problems.
That's a very insightful connection. Yes, despite knowing intellectually that human life is like smoke or shadow, a saying that's been around forever.
Right, we all know life is short.
We know it, but we often disregard it almost instinctively. Humans are naturally drawn to that brutish love of this world we talked about.
That instinctual attachment.
Yes. And we act, Calvin says, as if we were establishing immortality for ourselves on earth. We pour energy into things as if they'll last forever.
Building bigger barns, so to speak.
Exactly. Our minds get stunned, he says, by the empty dazzlement of riches, power, and honors.
Empty dazzlement, like shiny but ultimately worthless.
Pretty much. And our hearts get occupied with avarice, ambition, and lust. These things fill up our attention, blocking our view of anything beyond the earthly.
They weigh us down spiritually, make us sluggish.
Dull our spiritual senses, definitely. And even when we're forced to confront death, say, at a funeral.
It hits you for a moment.
For a moment, yes, that realization of life's vanity. But Calvin says it's often momentary. It vanishes as soon as we turn our backs and leaves not a trace of remembrance behind it.
Like it never happened. We just go back to chasing the same stuff.
It's like watching a show. You might be moved, but then the lights come up and it evaporates. We forget the lesson almost immediately.
So even with clear evidence, like death itself, our default setting pulls us back to this thoughtless assurance of earthly immortality, like spiritual amnesia.
That's a great term for it, spiritual amnesia. And because of this tendency, Calvin presents a very stark choice. He says there's no middle ground.
No middle ground. What's the choice?
Either the world must become worthless to us or hold us bound by intemperate love of it.
Worthless or bound. That sounds pretty extreme. No nuance there.
He argues there really isn't in terms of our ultimate affection. You can't serve two masters, essentially. Your heart's deepest loyalty has to lie somewhere.
And the world is constantly trying to win that loyalty.
Constantly. He says the present life has very many allurements with which to entice us, and much show of pleasantness, grace, and sweetness wherewith to wheedle us.
It looks appealing, feels good.
It really does. Worldly success, comfort, pleasure, they're powerful draws. And because they're so tempting, God has to step in.
With those trials we discussed.
Yes. He calls us away now and again so as not to be captivated by such panderings. The trials are meant to shake us out of that captivation.
To convince us, as you said earlier, of the miserable condition of earthly life.
Exactly. To wake us up from that spiritual slumber. It's not just a helpful suggestion. Calvin sees it as necessary for our spiritual health. If our hearts stay tied to what's fleeting,
we'll just keep being disappointed and distracted from what really matters.
Constantly distracted, constantly chasing smoke.
Okay, so given this rather bleak assessment of life's miseries and our tendency to ignore them, how should a believer actually view their present life? Is it just something to hate? Should we just walk around miserable until we die?
No, definitely not hatred or just being miserable. This is where the balance is really crucial. Calvin says believers must accustom themselves to contempt for the present life.
Okay, there's that word again, contempt. It sounds so negative, almost nihilistic, like we should just despise everything.
It does sound harsh to our ears, doesn't it? But we need to unpack what he means by it. He's not advocating for bitterness or rejecting all earthly joy.
So what is he getting at?
The key insight, I think, is that our capacity for deep affection, for desire, is limited. If we pour all our love, focus, and hope into what is ultimately fleeting and flawed,
There's nothing left for God.
for eternity.
Exactly. There's no room left to truly desire the perfect, lasting reality of God's kingdom. So this contempt isn't about hating the gift of life itself.
It's about reevaluating its ultimate worth compared to eternity. It's like clearing out the clutter in our hearts to make space for something infinitely greater.
A kind of strategic detachment, maybe. Not bitter rejection.
That's a much better way to think of it.
Yeah.
Strategic detachment. And this attitude is needed because, as he says, the mind is never seriously aroused to desire and ponder the life to come, unless it be previously imbued with contempt for the present life.
So seeing this life's limits actually frees us up to desire the next one more.
Yes, it frees believers from being captivated by the allurements, the show of pleasantness that this life offers. But, and this is vital, this contempt must not engender hatred of it or ingratitude against God.
So you can hold this life loosely without hating it?
Precisely. Life, even though it's crammed with infinite miseries, is still rightly to be counted among those blessings of God which are not to be spurned.
It's still a gift, even if it's a difficult one sometimes.
Yes. To deny its divine origin or benefit, to just reject the gift entirely, would be grave ingratitude toward God himself.
Okay, so it's a very careful balance then. Recognizing the struggles, the fleeting nature, the vanity, without dismissing that it comes from God and serves his purpose. How else should believers think about this life? It can't just be about seeing its flaws, right? We're not just waiting around.
Absolutely not just waiting around. Life is also framed as a testimony of divine benevolence.
A sign of God's goodness.
Yes, and a gift of God's kindness. Remember those lesser proofs and daily benefits.
Yeah, the taste of generosity.
Through those, God shows himself to be our Father, even now, before the full inheritance is revealed. We begin to taste the sweetness now, and that taste whets our hope and desire for the full meal later.
Building anticipation.
Exactly. And beyond that, Calvin uses another powerful image. This life is like a sentry post at which the Lord has posted us.
A sentry post. Like a soldier on duty.
Yes, and it's one which we must hold until he recalls us. This implies we have a job to do here.
It's not passive waiting at all.
Not at all. It suggests a divine purpose, an appointment for our time on earth. We're meant to abide in it at the Lord's pleasure.
Living faithfully in the place God put us.
Right. Vigilant, carrying out our duties, whatever they may be, while we wait for the commander's call to come home.
That framing really makes life sound like a period of preparation, doesn't it? A training ground for something more.
Precisely. That's exactly how Calvin sees it. The present life functions as a preparation, so to speak, for the glory of the heavenly kingdom.
Preparation through struggle.
Often, yes. God has ordained, he says, that those who are one day to be crowned in heaven should first undergo struggles on earth to attain victory.
Like athletes training for the prize. Or soldiers for battle.
Good analogies. It's not that we earn the crown through struggling. That's crucial in Reformed thought.
Right. Salvation is by grace.
Exactly. But God uses the process of struggle, the experience of overcoming through faith, to refine us and make us ready to receive that glory.
So the miseries have a purpose in that preparation.
Yes, they serve to wean us, that's the word he uses, wean us from excessive love of this present life.
Like weaning a baby off milk. It can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for growth.
That's the idea. It's uncomfortable, but it helps us mature so that the cross of Christ will at last triumph over the devil, flesh, sin, and wicked men in our hearts.
So it's all part of this bigger plan to purify us, to make us fit for that future state.
Yes. The discomfort is ultimately for our greater good, helping us find our deepest satisfaction in God alone, not in the temporary things of this world. And flowing from that understanding of life's purpose, the real shift, the core change in perspective for believers becomes clear.
Okay, what's the shift?
It's this. Whatever is taken away from the perverse love of this life ought to be added to the desire for a better one.
So every bit of affection we detach from the temporary should be reinvested in the eternal.
Exactly. It's a fundamental redirection of our heart's energy, our deepest longings. And when you make that comparison, when you really hold up this life against the life to come,
How does this life look then?
Calvin says it must be utterly despised and loathed, and even trampled underfoot.
Wow, despised and loathed. That sounds even stronger than contempt.
It does, but again, context is key. It's a comparative statement. Think about someone desperately homesick for a beautiful homeland.
Okay.
How might they view the difficult journey, the uncomfortable temporary shelters?
As just obstacles to endure, things to get past.
Right. They don't love the dusty road. They love the destination. In that light, Calvin uses metaphors like the earth being an exile,
A place we don't belong.
the world being a sepulcher, like a tomb,
Confining, lifeless,
and the body being a prison.
holding us back.
These are strong images, meant to convey a sense of spiritual longing, a desire for liberation from the limitations and brokenness here. The goal is to get believers to betake themselves wholly, to meditate upon that eternal life to come.
To really focus their minds and hearts on eternity.
Yes. Not as an escape from responsibility here, but as a way of properly valuing what's truly real, truly lasting, truly good, keeping that spiritual compass pointed firmly towards home.
This definitely presents a very different view of death than most people have.
Yeah.
We tend to dread it, fear it, avoid even talking about it.
Absolutely.
But the sources use that word monstrous to describe a certain kind of fear of death in Christians.
Yes, monstrous. It's considered unnatural, spiritually speaking, for Christians to be so gripped by fear that they tremble at the least mention of it.
Why monstrous? Isn't some fear natural?
Well, Calvin acknowledges a natural human aversion to dissolution. Our bodies are made for life, after all. But he argues it's wholly unbearable that there is not in Christian hearts any light of piety to overcome and suppress that fear by a greater consolation.
Meaning our faith, our hope, should be stronger than the natural fear.
It should provide a comfort that outweighs it. In fact, he goes further. Faith should compel believers ardently to seek what nature dreads.
Seek death. That sounds extreme again.
Not seek it in a self-destructive way, but to view it positively as a transition. Death is seen not as the end, but as being recalled from exile to dwell in the fatherland.
Going home.
Exactly, a release into perfect freedom. Imagine being let out of prison or finally reaching home after a long, hard journey abroad.
Liberation? Emancipation?
Those are the kinds of terms used. A glorious release from the limits and miseries of this current life into something far better.
Okay. And what about the body itself? We tend to identify so strongly with our physical selves. What happens to this prison, as Calvin called it?
Right, we do care about our bodies. But Calvin describes our current body as an unstable, defective, corruptible, fleeting, wasting, rotting tabernacle.
Not exactly flattering. A temporary tent.
A temporary tent, yes. But through death and resurrection, this worn-out tent will be renewed unto a firm, perfect, incorruptible, and finally, heavenly glory.
Renewed, not just discarded.
Renewed and transformed. It's not annihilation, but glorification. The body isn't just thrown away. It's made perfect, permanent, free from decay.
So, shedding the temporary dwelling for a permanent, glorious one.
That's the picture. A massive upgrade, you could say. And that's a key reason death shouldn't hold terror for believers. It leads to this amazing resurrection.
This transformation is definitely a compelling reason not to fear. So if we're really getting this, if we're living according to these ideas, what's the sign of real progress? How do we know if we're actually learning in this school of Christ, as Calvin puts it?
He gives a pretty clear and maybe challenging benchmark. He says, "No one has made progress in the school of Christ who does not joyfully await the day of death and final resurrection."
Joyfully await it. Not just accept it, but look forward to it with joy.
With joy, yes. Not a morbid fascination, but a happy anticipation of a glorious beginning. That day, the day of death or Christ's return, shouldn't cause dread.
But rejoicing.
Yes, rejoicing in good cheer. Because as Luke's gospel says, our redemption is drawing near.
So we should actually long for it.
Calvin says believers should anticipate the Lord's coming, not only with longing, but also with groaning and sighs, as the happiest thing of all.
Groaning and sighs sound less like joy.
It's the groaning of intense longing, like Paul describes in Romans 8, longing for the final liberation, the ultimate inheritance. It's the sign that your heart is truly set on God's promises.
So that joyful waiting is the fruit of having really reoriented your heart away from this world.
It's the mark of real progress in this school.
Okay, so this hope, this longing for the life to come, it becomes the believer's anchor. The sources even call it the soul comfort. How does that actually work? How does looking forward help us deal with the really tough stuff now, when things seem to be falling apart or we face real injustice?
It provides deep comfort, especially for believers who often feel, as Calvin puts it, as sheep destined for the slaughter.
That's vivid, vulnerable, facing danger.
Yes, capturing that reality of suffering. Believers often endure infinite miseries, he says, and injustices from the wicked. Without this heavenly focus, they truly would be desperately unhappy.
But Because their minds are intent upon heaven?
They can surmount whatever is in this world. They can look beyond the present aspect of affairs. This hope, this future reality, allows them to, without difficulty, bear up under such evils.
Without difficulty. That seems strong. Surely it's still hard.
Perhaps without being crushed is a better sense. It doesn't mean the suffering isn't real or painful, but the hope gives it context. It frames the suffering as temporary and part of a larger redemptive story.
So they can endure because their ultimate hope isn't tied to things getting better here.
Exactly. Their true reward, their vindication, lies beyond this fleeting world. The hope of eternity outweighs and reframes the impact of present troubles.
That's a powerful perspective on perseverance. And what does that future state, that piece of his kingdom, actually look like for believers? What are the promises?
The sources paint a beautiful picture. When the Lord finally will receive his faithful people into the peace of his kingdom, first, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes.
An end to all sorrow, all pain, all grief.
Completely. Every hint from this life undone. Then, he will clothe them with a robe of glory and rejoicing.
Signifying honor, joy.
Yes, ultimate dignity and unending joy. He will feed them with unspeakable sweetness of his delights.
Satisfaction beyond imagining.
A deep, pure satisfaction that surpasses anything earthly. He'll elevate them to his sublime fellowship.
Close, intimate communion with God.
Unhindered communion with the source of all goodness. And finally, he will deign to make them sharers in his happiness. We actually get to participate in God's own joy.
Wow. Complete blessedness, eternal satisfaction, unending closeness with God, free from all the messiness of here.
That's the vision. That's the hope.
It's certainly something to look forward to. But what about justice? What about those who cause the suffering now? The wicked who seem to prosper while believers struggle? Does this future hope address that imbalance?
Yes, that's a really crucial part of the comfort. The assurance of future justice is huge. While wicked people might flourish in wealth and honors now and seem to enjoy deep peace.
Getting away with it, basically.
Seemingly, yes. But Calvin says they will ultimately be cast into utter disgrace. Their current delights will turn into tortures.
A complete reversal.
Complete reversal. Their laughter and mirth into weeping and gnashing of teeth. Their seeming peace replaced by dire torment of conscience. Their indulgence punished with unquenchable fire.
This sounds like the biblical descriptions of hell.
It aligns with those, yes. This future judgment is presented as God's righteousness in action, settling all accounts. It provides rest to the unhappy and unjustly afflicted.
And consequences for the oppressors.
And repays with affliction the wicked who afflict the godly when Christ returns. It's a just vindication for those who suffered, and a righteous reckoning for those who caused it.
So the comfort isn't just about personal future bliss, but also about seeing God's justice prevail universally.
Exactly. It's confidence in God's ultimate righteous rule over all things.
It seems like this future focus, this hope, isn't just about waiting passively then. It actually fuels a kind of spiritual victory even now.
Absolutely. It's not just hope for tomorrow, it's a dynamic for today. By turning their eyes to the power of the resurrection, believers find that the cross of Christ will at last triumph over the devil, flesh, sin, and wicked men, even now in their own hearts and lives.
How does that work?
This perspective is motivating, it's active. Knowing the temporary nature of this life and the solid reality of the next shapes how we live. It pushes believers to meditate upon the future life more eagerly.
Makes eternity feel more real.
More real, more desirable. It helps them reject the empty allurements of the world and live their daily lives with mortality and eternity in view.
So that principle comes back. Whatever affection you take away from misplaced love for this life
ought to be added to the desire for the better one, the eternal one. It's a constant redirection of heart, mind, and energy, providing strength for today.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into Calvin's meditation on the future life. It really does offer a challenging, but maybe ultimately comforting way to look at our lives right now.
It does. It pushes us to think about how we react to everything, the good days, the hard days, and how those reactions can either tie us more tightly to this world or cultivate a deeper longing for what truly lasts.
And it challenges our idea of progress, doesn't it? Suggesting real growth is seen in that joyful, looking forward to the day we're finally called home.
A day that should change how we see every moment leading up to it.
So maybe something for all of us to think about. How might really embracing the temporary nature of this world change how you go about your day, your goals, your relationships? What if you lived as though your deepest desires were already aligned with that perfect, incorruptible glory that awaits?
That's the question, isn't it?
Something to chew on until our next deep dive.